So, since patch 4.2 hit live, I've gotten a lot of questions regarding hunter builds, basically if anything changed with the price change to Poison Star. In essence, the answer here is simply no, nothing really changed. There are some, well, adjustments that you can make to your builds, but really many of the items you were using beforehand are still very strong, or even too strong, and that's what this video is gonna be about. With the changes leading to Season 4, we saw various changes to the Shuriken tree, namely attack speed getting added to both Poison Star and Wind Demon. Poison Star was rarely picked up before, Wind Demon was already pretty popular, usually bought as a first crit item. Now, with the attack speed, these items became very strong and very much core in pretty much any hunter build. And though they already saw some nerfs, they were still picked up very frequently. With the latest patch, Poison Star saw a price increase by 200 gold and 10 physical power reduction, and for some reason a lot of people actually thought that would be the end of Poison Star, that it would not be viable anymore because of this nerf. Well, that didn't really happen, and I don't think it's gonna happen all too soon. And in this video we'll talk about the reasons for that and how this could be, well, changed. First of all, let's take a look at the standard hunter build at the moment, the standard items. So you will almost always have Death Toll as a starter. It's just very strong since it's buff. It was already very good before, but now there's just not much of a reason not to get it. Then you will have your choice of Warrior Tabi or Ninja Tabi. This pretty much depends on which items you want to go for later. If you want to go for Executioner or Titan's Bane, if you want to go for Devourer's Gauntlet or not. So there's a bit of flexibility, but really it comes down to one of these two boots. Then you have that situational slot where you might get Devourer's Gauntlet if you want to, where you could already get Poison Star, which was basically the standard in the last patch, or where you could now also consider getting Ekival. Ekival is still a very good bridge item, and with Poison Star's price being increased, you can still rush it, that's not wrong. But depending on what the enemy builds, they may have a trading advantage for a while, simply because Poison Star is not that accessible and cheap early compared to Ekival, and Ekival will give you a boxing advantage while your enemy is still trying to build his Poison Star. So, bit of a flex slot there, but afterwards you will usually see Poison Star, Wind Demon, then most likely Executioner or Titan's Bane. Sometimes you'll see that earlier, once again depends on the hunter you're playing, if he's more AA focused or ability focused, but either of those really at that point latest. Then Deathbringer, and depending on if there's a slot left, if you didn't build Devils, and well, you might put a situational there, often the situational will be Hasten Fatalis, but really it comes down to these items. There is not much else that you will see. And that's really weird, because if you think back last season, there was the crit build option with triple crit, but there was also Concise, and Concise was built quite frequently. And this is down to the stats of Concise, actually. Concise wasn't necessarily better as a very late game item, simply because you would be better off with triple crit in that regard when you just look at the raw DPS. But Concise had power, attack speed, and a passive that gave you a lot of damage, which meant that the moment you got it, you got ahead in the power curve. No crit item, no single crit item was able to compete with it, so you always needed one extra item to really compete with Concise again, and well, yeah, as such there was a use for it. Concise is still good, it's still strong, it still works very well against tankier targets, but it just doesn't make sense to build it on hunters all that much, unless you want to use your very last situational slot for that, but realistically, you don't want to do that. Realistically, triple crit is enough damage for anything to melt. But why has crit suddenly gained so much more viability over Concise? Basically, it's the attack speed. Like I said, the good thing about Concise is that it has power, attack speed, and some other form of damage increase via the passive. Now let's look at what Poison Star has. 20 physical power, 15% attack speed, and 15% critical strike chance, which translates into another source of extra damage, or maybe it's the same source if you want to look at it like that, but doesn't really matter in the bigger picture. Look at Wind Demon. 30 physical power, 10% attack speed, and 20 critical strike chance, 20%. So, there you go, you have everything you need in those items. They are basically complete items, as much as that is a word you could use. They don't really need anything else to function. you can go for a penetration option. You always want a penetration option, that was Titan's Bane or Executioner. You want boots. And other than that, you're very flexible. You can get lifesteal if you want to, or you cannot. You can get Haste Fatalis, but you don't really need anything else. You don't need an extra attack speed item for them to work properly. And attack speed and crit in one item was something we had way back in the day with Rage, and it was removed for that very reason. If you put attack speed and crit on the same item, that means that the enemy has more chances to crit, because they shoot off more shots in the same time, because they have more attack speed. That would be compensated for by the lower power, but these items already have power. Now let's just say that doesn't really matter because of the lower power. A crit is gonna hit less. What is left is the passives, and if you have more attack speed, that also means you're more likely to proc the passive of the crit item that you have, if the passive of the crit item procs with crit. It's getting a little tangled up here, but you get the idea. If you attack more often, you're gonna get more crits, and more crits lead to more passives, or like more chances to proc the passive, basically. And these passives that we're talking about here are really strong passives. We're talking about Poison Star, which has a 2-second slow, 20% slow, and 20% damage reduction. It's basically two passives in one. I don't even know why that is a thing. And then we also have the passive of Wind Demon, which is an attack speed increase by 20% and a movement speed increase by 20%. Which basically means, because we get even more attack speed, you have even more chances to crit, which means that it's more likely for the passive to proc again afterwards, which was one of the main deals with Poison Star, that the 2 seconds usually don't last long enough. But if you have that much attack speed and still viable to go into triple crit, then you will keep this passive up all the time, despite of it just being 2 seconds. And then these effects combined, which is what you will see, is 20% slow, 20% minus damage output on the enemy, while you have 20% extra movement speed and attack speed, meaning you deal a lot more damage, they deal a lot less damage, you're a lot faster, they're a lot slower. So what are they realistically gonna do against you? Slap in a Haste and Fatalis with a new pen, then you have even more movement speed and they basically can't even reach you anymore while you're supersonic fast. And that's exactly what's happening! And that is why these items will not go anywhere unless they see much more significant nerfs than they currently have seen. And it's awkward to me, because it's so obvious. They, especially Wind Demon, never needed attack speed. You could have just left Wind Demon as it was a very good item, no change there, and it would have worked very well. Poison Star was relatively weak, it was considered underwhelming, but now it just has everything that you want in an item, so why would you not build it? And Kin Size can't compete. Kin Size has extra damage, compared to the other two, but that's all. If you have Kin Size and you're going up against someone who has Poison Star, well, have fun, because the extra damage you get is basically getting lost due to the passive, and the extra slow will make it a lot harder for you to apply basics or get away from their basics. So it's not an even boxing match anymore, and that amplifies the moment they get more crit, because then they crit more than you, and well, you get the idea. So, yeah. There's just one Hunter build in its core, there's just some flex options in there. You have like, you always have Death Toll, you always have Boots, then you maybe have your Lifesteal like I will, then you always have Poison Star, always Wind Demon, always Execution or Titan's Bane, this is down to taste and the god, and you always have Deathbringer. And maybe you have Haste and Fatalis if you don't like Lifesteal, and that's your choices. You might have RC in there somewhere if you want to have some sort of Lifesteal but you don't like Devils, and that's it. There's very limited options outside of that. There are specific gods who can make use of other builds, the ability focus builds. Think Ullr, think Medusa maybe, who will want some more power early on for ultimate, maybe even still build Transcendence. But for the majority of hunters, this build is all they need. If you're having a attack speed hunter or somewhat of a boxing hunter somewhere in between, maybe even Anhur, I don't think you would build any more power than that on Anhur. I don't think you would change anything up, because this build is just really, really good overall. But that's not even all, we're not even stopping there. That's just the upsides for the hunters. At the same time, there is a downside that has been introduced this season that wasn't there before. There was Celestial Legion Helm, which was an anti-crit item, and that's, well, in its essence been removed from the game. It was completely changed, the new passive has nothing to do with anti-crit anymore. And that was the only item choice you really had against crit. There are some options like Hide of the Enemy and Lion, like Thorns that you can play around with, that maybe help a little bit, because you can basically hope that the enemy bursts themselves to death, but That's not really a crit counter, that's an unspecific damage counter which happens to work very well against crit because crit has high damage numbers, but it's nothing that would target out a crit on its own and isolate, well, specifically against crit. So the only guards that really are left with something against crits are A Hunter, which would be Hou Yi, and B Geb. So, well, those two are in a good spot, but what does that mean for everyone else? Where's everyone else left in this? I very much believe that crit in its current state is too strong with these items. I think these items need very specific nerfs, but you don't see people picking up Malice. You literally always see them pick up Poison Star and Wind Demon because these items are so strong. And they're in fact so strong that even guards I would like previously recommend against building them, like Mercury, make good use of them now. And that basically speaks volumes for itself already. With that, thank you guys for watching. I hope this was interesting, hope this was insightful. If you enjoyed this, feel free to leave a like, feel free to subscribe if you haven't yet. See you for the next one tomorrow. Duke Sloth, out.